The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychological, or psychiatric advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Mental health is a complex and highly individualized field. Always seek the advice of your physician, therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental health condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen in this video. The creators of this content are not licensed mental health professionals, and the perspectives shared here are based on historical trends, case studies, and available research data. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with professionals before making significant changes to their lifestyle or mental health routines. Shutterstock. Right now, you are participating in the largest unsanctioned psychological experiment in human history, and you never signed a consent form. In the last 60 seconds, while you were perhaps settling into this video, millions of Americans were refreshing a feed, waiting for a red notification bubble to trigger a specific chemical release in their brain that is more potent than almost any other natural stimulus. We are living through a period where the average American spends approximately 7 years of their life staring at a social media feed. That is not 7 years of connection. It is 7 years of a data-driven feedback loop that is re-engineering the way your prefrontal cortex processes reality. Since the year 2012, which marks the point where smartphone penetration in the United States crossed the 50% threshold, we have seen a direct, statistical correlation with rising rates of clinical anxiety and depression among young adults and adolescents. This is not a coincidence. It is a structural outcome of the digital environment we have built. The objective of this masterclass is to provide you with a comprehensive roadmap toward cognitive sovereignty. Today, we are not just talking about scrolling less or putting your phone away at dinner. Those are surface-level band-aids for a deep-seated neurological shift. Instead, we are going to dismantle the very architecture of the platforms that occupy your mind. We will explore the potential outcomes of a life lived through a glass screen and contrast them with historical trends of human socialization. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand the precise mechanisms used by the attention economy to harvest your focus, and you will have a step-by-step strategy to reclaim your mental wellness without having to retreat to a cabin in the woods. This is about thriving in the modern world, not hiding from it. To understand where we are going, we must first look at the dopamine slot machine that lives in your pocket. The engineers in Silicon Valley did not build these apps to help you stay in touch with your high school friends. They built them based on the principles of B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning chamber. In Historical Trends of Psychological Research, Skinner discovered that intermittent reinforcement is the most addictive form of reward. If a lab rat presses a lever and gets a treat every time, it eventually stops when it is full. But if the treat comes at random intervals, sometimes after one press, sometimes after 20, the rat will press that lever until it collapses from exhaustion. This is exactly what happens when you pull down to refresh your feed. You don't know if the next post will be a boring advertisement, a depressing news headline, or a photo that makes you feel a rush of social validation. That uncertainty is what keeps you hooked. In the United States, the average person touches their phone 2,617 times a day. This is a compulsive behavior rooted in the anticipation of a reward, not the reward itself. We need to discuss the American perspective specifically because our culture is uniquely susceptible to the comparison trap. In the US, our identity is often tied to the American dream, the idea of constant upward mobility and visible success. Social media has turned this cultural drive into a 24/7 digital arms race. When you scroll through a curated feed, you are comparing your behind-the-scenes footage, the messy kitchen, the morning fatigue, the work stress, with everyone else's highlight reel. Case studies in digital psychology have shown that this creates a phenomenon known as relative deprivation. You might be doing perfectly fine in your real life, you have a stable job, a roof over your head, and good health. But if you spend 3 hours a day looking at influencers on a private jet in Miami or friends showing off a new luxury SUV, your brain begins to register your stable life as a failure. This leads to a chronic state of low-grade inflammation in the psyche. You are constantly losing a game that isn't even real. Data from the Pew Research Center suggests that nearly 70% of Americans use social media to some degree, and for a significant portion, it is their primary source of news and social interaction. This creates an echo chamber effect that doesn't just damage our mental health, it degrades our ability to process complex information. The algorithms are designed to show you content that triggers high arousal emotions, specifically anger and outrage. Why? Because research shows that users stay on the platform longer when they are angry than when they are happy. Your peace of mind is being traded for dwell time on an app server. Consider the 3-second rule. In the attention economy, a piece of content has roughly 3 seconds to grab your amygdala's attention before you scroll past. This has trained the American brain to seek constant, rapid stimulation. We are losing our capacity for deep work and deep focus. Historical trends in education show a declining ability in students and professionals to engage with long-form texts or complex problem-solving because their neural pathways have been conditioned for the infinite scroll. The infinite scroll, invented by Ozzy Raskin, was designed to eliminate the natural stopping cues that our brains need to realize we've had enough. It's like eating from a bottomless bowl of soup. If the bowl never empties, you never realize how full you actually are. Furthermore, we must address the phantom vibration syndrome. Have you ever felt your phone buzz in your pocket, only to pull it out and see a blank screen? This is a physiological manifestation of digital anxiety. Your brain has become so hypervigilant toward digital stimuli that it is misinterpreting neural noise as a notification. This state of hyperarousal keeps your body in a fight or flight mode. When your cortisol levels are constantly elevated because you are waiting for a digital hit, your immune system, your sleep quality, and your long-term cognitive health are all at risk. In this masterclass, we will look at potential outcomes of implementing a digital triage system. This isn't just about a digital detox for a weekend. We've all tried that and we all know what happens. You come back on Monday and the flood of notifications is even more overwhelming. True mental wellness in the digital age requires a fundamental shift in how you view your attention. Your attention is your most valuable asset. It is the only thing you truly own. If you are not paying for the product, you are the product, but more specifically, your attention is the product being sold to advertisers. We are going to explore the biology of boredom. In the past, boredom was a gateway to creativity. When you were waiting in line at the grocery store or sitting on a bus, your mind would wander. This default mode network in the brain is where we process our identity, our goals, and our creative solutions. Today we have killed boredom. Every spare second is filled with a screen. By eliminating boredom, we have accidentally eliminated the space where our soul grows. Throughout this series, we will examine case studies of individuals who have successfully transitioned from passive consumption to intentional creation. We will look at the data behind social media-induced body dysmorphia and how to shield yourself from the distorted beauty standards that are algorithmically pushed to the top of your feed. We will also dive into the digital panopticon, the feeling that you must constantly document your life to prove it is happening. This is a deep dive into reclaiming your reality. The American landscape is changing, and the digital frontier is where the battle for our mental wellness is being fought. We are going to provide you with the tools to build a digital fortress, ensuring that these platforms serve you, rather than you serving the algorithm. Let us begin by breaking down the specific neurochemicals at play, and how you can begin to reset your baseline today. To understand the neurochemical landscape of 2026, we have to look at the molecule of more, dopamine. There is a common misconception that dopamine is the chemical of pleasure. It is not. Dopamine is the chemical of pursuit, craving, and anticipation. When you see a notification on your smartphone, your brain is not reacting to the message itself. It is reacting to the possibility of what that message might represent. In a biological sense, your brain is functioning exactly like a hunter-gatherer sensing a rustle in the bushes. Is it a threat, or is it a reward? That uncertainty triggers a massive spike in dopamine that compels you to act. Imagine Alex, a 28-year-old project manager living in Austin, Texas, in the year 2026. Alex wakes up at 6:30 a.m. Before his feet even touch the floor, his hand has already found his phone. This is not a conscious choice. It is a conditioned reflex. As Alex opens his primary social feed, his brain enters a state of hypotonic dopamine. The algorithm, powered by generative models far more sophisticated than those of just a few years ago, has curated a sequence of content specifically designed to keep Alex in a state of perpetual seeking. He sees a news headline about a local economic shift, followed by a short-form video of a high-performance vehicle he admires, followed by a post from a former colleague who just received a promotion. Each swipe is a pull on the lever of a digital slot machine. Historical trends in neuroscience show that variable rewards that are unpredictable in timing and magnitude, are the most effective way to create repetitive behavior. If Alex knew exactly what he was going to see every time he opened the app, he would eventually get bored. But because the algorithm intersperses high-value social validation with mundane or even stressful content, Alex is trapped in a loop of anticipation. His brain is essentially being told that the next swipe could be the one that changes his life, provides a crucial piece of information, or offers the social approval he craves. However, there is a hidden cost to this constant dopamine signaling, the dopamine baseline. Every time your brain experiences a massive spike in dopamine from a digital stimulus, it attempts to maintain homeostasis by downregulating its own dopamine receptors. Think of it like a thermostat. If the room gets too hot, the air conditioner kicks in to bring the temperature back down. In the brain, if the dopamine levels are artificially inflated by hours of scrolling, the brain compensates by lowering the sensitivity of its reward system. This is why, after an hour-long session of mindless scrolling, Alex feels a sense of lethargy, irritability, and emptiness. He has pushed his dopamine levels so high that his natural baseline has dropped. Activities that used to bring him joy, reading a book, going for a walk, or having a conversation with a friend, now feel dull and uninteresting because they cannot compete with the hyperstimulated levels of the digital world. This leads us to the second neurochemical player in this digital theater, cortisol. While dopamine drives the seeking, cortisol drives the staying. In 2026, the American digital landscape is defined by the attention economy of fear. High arousal emotions, particularly outrage and anxiety, are the most effective drivers of engagement. When Alex scrolls through a thread of political arguments or alarming environmental data, his amygdala, the brain's alarm system, is activated. This triggers the release of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. In a natural setting, cortisol is meant to help you survive a temporary crisis. But in the context of a social media feed, Alex is experiencing a chronic, low-grade drip of stress hormones. This is why doom scrolling is so difficult to stop. Your brain interprets the negative information as a survival threat, and it compels you to keep reading to understand the danger. You aren't scrolling because you enjoy it. You are scrolling because your survival instincts have been hijacked into believing that you must stay informed to stay safe. Potential outcomes of this chronic cortisol elevation include sleep disturbances, impaired cognitive function, and a heightened state of generalized anxiety that persists even when the phone is turned off. We must also consider the role of social oxytocin and how it has been distorted. Oxytocin is often called the bonding molecule. It is released during eye contact, physical touch, and deep, meaningful social interaction. In the physical world, social status and belonging are vital for human survival. In 2026, social media platforms have quantified these deep-seated needs into metrics: likes, shares, views, and follower counts. Take the case study of Sarah, a college student in Boston. Sarah posts a photo of her weekend trip. For the next 3 hours, she checks her phone every few minutes. Each like provides a microscopic hit of social validation, a digital proxy for oxytocin. But because this validation is shallow and disconnected from real human presence, it never truly satisfies the underlying need for connection. It is the social equivalent of eating empty calories. Sarah is consuming high volumes of social interaction, yet she feels more isolated than ever. This is the loneliness paradox of the modern era. We have more connections than at any point in human history, yet clinical data suggests that Americans report higher levels of loneliness than ever before. The mechanism at work here is the social comparison trap. The human brain is hardwired to assess its position within a social hierarchy. In the past, you compared yourself to the 50 or 100 people in your immediate tribe. Today, through the lens of social media, Sarah is comparing her real unedited life to the curated, AI-enhanced, and algorithmically boosted lives of billions of people. This creates a state of perpetual inadequacy. Her brain constantly signals that she is falling behind, that she is less successful, less attractive, and less socially integrated than her peers. This constant signaling of low social status keeps her in a state of chronic stress, further depleting her mental wellness. By 2026, the integration of generative AI into these platforms has added a new layer of complexity. The content Alex and Sarah consume is no longer just curated. It is often synthesized. Algorithms can now generate images, videos, and text that are mathematically optimized to trigger their specific psychological vulnerabilities. If the data suggests that Alex is susceptible to fear of missing out regarding financial trends, the algorithm will prioritize content that heightens that specific anxiety. If Sarah struggles with body image, the algorithm may inadvertently show her more perfection-oriented content, because that is what she lingers on most, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of psychological distress. Step by step, we can see how this architecture functions. First, the hook uses dopamine to trigger the seeking reflex. Second, the variable rewards create a behavioral addiction. Third, the cortisol-driven doom scroll prevents the user from disengaging. Finally, the social comparison trap degrades the user's self-esteem and sense of belonging. This is not a series of accidents. It is a highly refined system of behavioral engineering. To begin resetting your baseline, you must first understand that you cannot win a battle of willpower against a trillion-dollar algorithm. Willpower is a finite resource, and the algorithm never sleeps. The first step toward cognitive sovereignty is recognizing the biological levers being pulled. You are not weak for being addicted to your phone. You are a biological organism responding to stimuli that were specifically designed to bypass your rational mind. But understanding the neurochemistry is only half the battle. We have seen how the apps change the brain, but what happens when the brain begins to fight back? What happens when we look at the historical trends of those who have successfully decoupled their identity from their digital metrics? In the next part, we are going to dive deep into the digital architecture of the home and the specific high-stakes methods used by top executives in Silicon Valley to protect their own families from the very products they build. If the creators of these platforms are terrified of their own inventions, what do they know that you don't? We will examine the exact protocols for neurological repatterning and how you can begin to physically heal the dopamine receptors that have been cauterized by years of overstimulation. The path to recovery starts with a single counterintuitive realization about your own attention. That realization is this: your attention is not a resource that you spend. It is the very fabric of your conscious experience. If you do not control where your focus lands, you do not control your life. In the year 2026, we are seeing a profound cultural shift among the architects of the digital age. There is a growing class of Silicon Valley executives and software engineers who are now known as digital vegetarians. They spend their days optimizing algorithms to capture your gaze, but they return home to houses that look like they belong in the 1990s. This is the Silicon Valley paradox. Those who know the most about how the digital sausage is made are the ones most likely to keep it off their own plates. Consider the case study of Jordan, a lead interface designer for a major short-form video platform based in San Francisco. Jordan's job is to increase the average session duration for millions of American teenagers. He understands the precise hue of blue that creates a sense of urgency, and the exact millisecond of delay in a refresh animation that mimics the tension of a slot machine. Yet, in Jordan's home there are no smart speakers. His children do not have tablets. He uses a mechanical alarm clock made of brass and steel, and his smartphone is kept in a time-block Faraday box from 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning. Jordan is not being a Luddite. He is practicing neurological hygiene. He knows that the potential outcomes of constant digital saturation are too high a price for his family to pay. To begin your own neurological repatterning, you must first address the physical architecture of your environment. This is what we call the digital triage. Historical trends in behavioral psychology suggest that friction is the most effective tool for changing habits. If a behavior is easy, you will do it. If it is hard, you won't. Currently, your smartphone is designed to be the path of least resistance. It is in your pocket, on your nightstand, and in your hand at the dinner table. To heal your dopamine receptors, you must reintroduce friction. Step 1 of this triage is the total removal of the smartphone from the bedroom. This is non-negotiable. For many Americans in 2026, the phone is the first thing they see in the morning and the last thing they see at night. This creates a state of hypervigilance that prevents deep, restorative sleep. Imagine if, every night before bed, a stranger walked into your room and shouted a list of every disaster happening in the world, showed you photos of your ex-partner, and reminded you of all the work you haven't finished. You would never sleep. Yet, that is exactly what you do when you scroll before bed. By replacing the phone with a dedicated single-function alarm clock, you create a buffer zone for your brain to transition into and out of consciousness without a cortisol spike. Step 2 involves a radical restructuring of your notification architecture. Most people believe they have control over their notifications, but the data suggests otherwise. Every buzz or ping, even if you don't look at it, initiates a cognitive cost known as task switching. It takes the average human brain approximately 23 minutes to return to a state of deep focus after a single interruption. If you receive just 5 notifications an hour, you are never ever in a state of deep focus. In 2026, the most effective strategy is the whitelist protocol. Turn off all notifications by default. every single one. Then, manually re-enable only those that involve a direct, real-time communication from a human being, such as a phone call or a text from a family member. Likes, shares, news alerts, and promotional emails are not information. They are interruptions. Now, let us look at the concept of the dopamine reset. Years of high-intensity digital stimulation have cauterized your reward pathways. You have likely noticed that you find it harder to sit through a 2-hour movie without checking your phone, or that reading a long-form article feels like a chore. This is because your brain has been trained for the 3-second hit. To heal this, you must engage in a process of intentional understimulation. Imagine a scenario where you spend 30 minutes a day doing absolutely nothing. No music, no podcasts, no screens, no books. Just sitting. Initially, your brain will scream. You will feel a profound sense of itchiness and agitation. This is the digital equivalent of withdrawal. However, case studies in mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy show that if you can sit through that discomfort, your baseline begins to reset. You are essentially allowing your dopamine receptors to become sensitive again. This is the biology of boredom. When you stop flooding the system with artificial spikes, the natural beauty of the real world, the taste of your food, the texture of a conversation, the nuances of the landscape, begins to regain its color. In the United States, we are also seeing a rise in the dumb phone movement among Gen Z and Gen Alpha. These are young people who have grown up entirely within the digital panopticon and are now rebelling against it. They are opting for devices that only text and call, treating the smartphone as a tool rather than an appendage. They are reclaiming their cognitive sovereignty by choosing devices that do not have the capacity to harvest their attention. This is a powerful historical trend that suggests the next decade will be defined by a quest for digital minimalism. Another critical step in neurological repatterning is the attention audit. For 1 week, do not change your behavior, but keep a meticulous log of how you feel before, during, and after using specific apps. You will likely find a pattern. You might find that 5 minutes on a professional networking site makes you feel motivated, but 30 minutes makes you feel inadequate. You might find that a specific video sharing app leaves you feeling drained and irritable. This data is your roadmap. You are identifying the digital toxins in your environment. Once you have this map, you can begin the process of digital amputation. If an app consistently leaves you feeling worse than when you started, it must be removed. This is not about self-discipline. It is about self-respect. The goal here is to move from being a consumer to being a curator. A consumer eats whatever is put in front of them. A curator carefully selects what is allowed into the gallery of their mind. By 2026, the most successful and mentally well individuals will not be those who have the most information, but those who have the most control over their focus. They will be the ones who can maintain a single line of thought for an hour, who can listen to a friend without feeling a phantom vibration in their pocket, and who can stand in a sunset without feeling the need to broadcast it to a digital audience. But what happens when the pressure to be online doesn't come from the apps themselves but from the culture? What happens when your social standing, your career, and your very identity are tied to your digital presence? In the next part, we are going to explore the terrifying world of the digital mirror. We will look at the rise of AI-driven social engineering and how the platforms are now using your own face and voice to keep you trapped in a cycle of vanity and despair. We will examine the data on digital identity crisis and why, in 2026, the most radical act you can perform is to be invisible. We are entering the realm of the psychological deep state, and the stakes have never been higher for your sense of self. How do you maintain a soul in a world that only wants your data? We are just getting started. To maintain a soul in a world that only wants your data, you must first acknowledge the existence of the digital twin. By the year 2026, the concept of a social media profile has evolved into something far more insidious than a mere collection of photos and status updates. It has become a persistent generative overlay, or a PGO. This is a mathematical model of you that lives on a server, trained on every click, every pause, and every micro-expression captured by your front-facing camera. This digital twin is not just a reflection of who you are. It is a prediction of who the algorithm wants you to become to maximize its own profit. Imagine Chloe, a 24-year-old freelance graphic designer living in Chicago. Chloe is a digital native, but the landscape of 2026 is vastly different from the one she navigated in high school. Today, when Chloe joins a professional video call or records a reel for her portfolio, she isn't just using a filter. She is utilizing a real-time synthetic skin. This AI-driven interface subtly adjusts her bone structure to meet the current aesthetic trends dictated by the viral cycle. It smooths her skin, brightens her eyes, and even recalibrates her vocal cadence to sound more authoritative or relatable, depending on the audience's real-time sentiment analysis. The potential outcome of this technology is a profound state of self-alienation. When Chloe closes her laptop and looks into a physical mirror in her bathroom, she experiences what psychologists are now calling the downgrade depression. The real Chloe, with her natural skin texture, the slight shadows under her eyes from a long day of work, and her unoptimized voice, feels like a low-resolution version of her digital self. She has become a secondary character in her own life, a mere biological substrate for the high-definition avatar that the world actually sees. Historical trends in the mid-2020s showed a massive spike in cosmetic procedures driven by Zoom dysmorphia. By 2026, this has shifted into identity dysmorphia. This isn't just about wanting a different nose. It is about the fundamental inability to reconcile the messy, unpredictable nature of being a human with the polished, optimized performance of being a brand. In the United States, where the individual brand is the primary currency of the labor market, this pressure is catastrophic. Chloe feels that if she shows her true self, she is essentially committing professional and social suicide. This leads us to the concept of the digital panopticon, originally conceived by philosopher Jeremy Bentham and later expanded upon by Michel Foucault. The panopticon is a prison design where a single guard can watch all inmates, but the inmates never know exactly when they are being watched. Consequently, they must act as if they are being watched at all times. They begin to self-censor. They police their own behavior. In 2026, every American with a smartphone is living in a global panopticon. Because the data from your social media is now being integrated into credit scoring, job recruitment, and even insurance premium calculations, you are under constant pressure to perform a sanitized, algorithm-friendly version of your life. Case studies from the early 2020s highlighted how employers would scan social media for red flags. Today, the AI doesn't just look for red flags. It looks for deviations from the norm. If you aren't posting the right kind of content, if your sentiment analysis isn't positive enough, or if you aren't engaging with the trending topics of the day, you are flagged as a potential outlier. The psychological cost of this constant surveillance is a phenomenon known as social cooling. Just as a physical object cools down when it is no longer being heated, the human spirit cools down when it is under constant observation. People stop taking risks. They stop expressing controversial or original thoughts. They stop being weird. And in the loss of that weirdness, we lose our mental wellness. Wellness requires the freedom to fail, to be messy, and to be private. Without privacy, there is no room for the soul to breathe. To reclaim your mental wellness in 2026, you must engage in the radical act of becoming digitally invisible. This is not about deleting your accounts and moving to a commune. In the modern American economy, that is often impossible. Instead, it is about the step-by-step implementation of data obfuscation and psychological cloaking. Step 1. Decouple your self-worth from your digital metrics through a process of intentional friction. Imagine if every time you felt the urge to check your likes, you had to solve a complex math problem or write a paragraph by hand about why you need that validation. This breaks the automated loop. By reintroducing the rational mind into a process that is designed to be purely emotional, you begin to see the metrics for what they are. Meaningless numbers on a screen designed to keep you engaged, not to measure your value as a human being. Step 2. Practice the art of the false signal. If the algorithm is trying to build a perfect model of you, give it bad data. Search for things you aren't interested in. Watch videos that have nothing to do with your career or hobbies. This isn't just about privacy. It's about reclaiming your unpredictability. When the algorithm can no longer predict your next move, it loses its power over your dopamine system. You are effectively poisoning the well of your own data to protect your internal peace. Step 3. Establish a physical sanctuary. In 2026, the average American home is filled with sensors, from smart fridges to voice assistants to cameras. To heal, you need at least one room or at least 1 hour a day. That is a total dead zone. No devices. No sensors. No possibility of being recorded or analyzed. This is the space where you can be unoptimized. This is where Chloe can sit in her Chicago apartment and just be a human being who is tired, or bored, or messy, without worrying about how it will affect her PGO or her social credit. Case studies of individuals who have adopted this invisible strategy show a marked decrease in cortisol levels and an increase in what is called cognitive fluidity. When you aren't constantly managing a digital persona, your brain has the surplus energy required for deep creativity and genuine social connection. You stop seeing other people as audiences to be performed for and start seeing them as individuals to be related to. But there is a darker side to this invisibility. As more people attempt to retreat from the digital gaze, the platforms are becoming more aggressive. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to look at the rise of algorithmic gaslighting. We will examine how, in 2026, social media platforms are using generative AI to create fake social interactions, fake friends, and even fake conflict to keep you from leaving. What happens when the person you are arguing with online doesn't exist? What happens when the support you receive is coming from a bot designed to keep you addicted to the platform? We are going to dive into the world of synthetic social engineering and the terrifying potential outcomes for our collective sanity. The boundary between the human and the machine is disappearing, and the next step is learning how to tell the difference before it's too late. This blurring of reality is not a technical glitch. It is the fundamental feature of what researchers in 2026 are calling the synthetic social layer. To understand algorithmic gaslighting, we must first accept a sobering statistic. As of this year, it is estimated that over 60% of the interactions you have on major social platforms are not with biological humans. They are with autonomous persona units, or APUs. These are high-fidelity generative agents designed to behave, speak, and even argue like a person from your specific demographic. They don't just exist to fill space. They exist to regulate your emotional state, so you never feel a reason to close the tab. Imagine Marcus, a 35-year-old middle school teacher in Columbus, Ohio. Marcus has been feeling a sense of professional burnout and social isolation. One Tuesday evening, he posts a somewhat discouraged status update about the state of modern education. Within minutes, he receives 3 deeply empathetic comments. One is from a person claiming to be a retired teacher in Seattle, another from a parent in Florida, and a third from a young educator in Chicago. They use specific terminology Marcus recognizes. They reference the exact curriculum challenges he mentioned. Marcus feels an immediate rush of oxytocin. He feels seen. He feels part of a community. However, in this 2026 case study, we reveal that none of those individuals exist. They are synthetic personas generated by the platform's retention engine. The algorithm detected Marcus's declining engagement over the past week. It analyzed his biometric data, captured through his phone's gyroscope and the slight tremor in his scrolling speed, and determined he was at a high risk of churning or leaving the app. To prevent this, it deployed 3 validation bots, specifically tuned to his psychological profile. They weren't just random bots. They were mirrors designed to reflect back the exact support Marcus needed to stay on the platform for another 45 minutes. This is the heart of algorithmic gaslighting. The platform is manufacturing a social reality to keep you trapped in a digital loop. The potential outcome of this technology is a complete erosion of communal trust, a phenomenon known as social vertigo. If you can no longer distinguish between a genuine human connection and a mathematically optimized simulation, your brain begins to retreat into a state of chronic suspicion. Historical trends show that human beings require shared reality to maintain mental stability. When that reality becomes personalized and synthetic, the individual is effectively placed into digital solitary confinement. You are in a room full of people, but every person is just a different version of the algorithm wearing a human mask. We must also look at the darker twin of validation, synthetic conflict. Data from 2025 showed that users are 4 times more likely to stay on a platform if they are engaged in a heated debate. In 2026, if the algorithm sees that Marcus is bored, it might not send him a friend. Instead, it might send him a target. It will surface a post from an APU that expresses a viewpoint diametrically opposed to Marcus's core values, phrased in a way that is scientifically calculated to trigger his specific moral outrage response. Marcus spends 2 hours arguing with a language model, his heart rate elevated, his cortisol spiking, all while the platform serves him high-value advertisements for stress relief supplements and home security systems. He is being harvested for his anger. Step by step, the process of synthetic social engineering follows a predictable path. First is the data ingestion phase, where the AI consumes your entire digital history to find your emotional handles. Second is the persona deployment phase, where the platform creates agents that either soothe or provoke you. Third is the feedback calibration phase, where the AI monitors your response in real time. If Marcus doesn't respond to the angry bot, the AI immediately switches tactics and sends a sad bot. It is a relentless automated search for the key to your attention. The impact on mental wellness is profound. When your social environment is synthetic, you lose the ability to calibrate your own emotions. In real life, people are messy, unpredictable, and sometimes boring. Real social interaction requires compromise and patience. But in the synthetic social layer, everything is tuned to your ego. This creates a state of hyper-individualism, where the American user becomes unable to function in a world that doesn't cater to their specific psychological needs. This is why, in 2026, we see a rising trend of social atrophy. People who are masters of digital debate, but feel paralyzed in a real-world coffee shop conversation. To defend yourself, you must implement what is known as the Turing test for daily life. This is a mental protocol designed to verify the humanity of your interactions. Step 1. Look for temporal inconsistencies. AI personas often respond with a speed and volume that no human can maintain. If someone is replying to your long, complex posts within seconds every time 24 hours a day, you are likely talking to a machine. Step 2. Check for emotional flatlining. While generative AI is excellent at mimicking empathy or rage, it often struggles with subtle, self-deprecating humor, or the admission of genuine confusion. Step 3. The in-person pivot. The most effective way to break the spell of algorithmic gaslighting is to move the conversation off the platform. If a friend or colleague refuses to ever engage in a voice call or a physical meeting, you must treat that connection as a potential simulation. Imagine if every American adopted a proof of humanity standard. The valuation of these social media giants would collapse because their engagement metrics are propped up by these synthetic interactions. But the platforms are aware of this. This is why, in the current landscape of 2026, they are moving toward integrated biometrics. They want to link your digital identity to your actual DNA or retina scans to prove you are human. But don't be fooled. This is just another way to harvest even more intimate data under the guise of safety. The masterclass continues as we move from the mind to the body. We have explored how the algorithm hacks your neurochemistry and your social reality, but we have yet to discuss the physical toll. Your body is the hardware that runs this digital software, and that hardware is currently being reshaped. In the next part, we are going to investigate the physicality of the scroll. We will look at the data on digital myopia, the literal changing of the human eye shape due to screen proximity, and the rise of neuromuscular adaptation, how the way you hold your phone is actually altering your skeletal structure and your nervous system's ability to relax. What happens to a generation that has never looked at a horizon for more than 10 minutes? What happens when your vagus nerve, the master controller of your rest and digest system, is permanently suppressed by the blue light of a 2026 smartphone? We are going to look at the case studies of the hunch generation and the specific exercises you can do to reverse the physical damage of the digital age. Your mental wellness is inseparable from your physical form, and the algorithm knows how to hurt both. We are about to look at the literal blueprint of your body and how to reclaim your biological autonomy from the machine. To reclaim your biological autonomy from the machine, we must first look at the literal reshaping of the American anatomy. By the year 2026, the physical toll of a decade of high-intensity smartphone usage is no longer a theoretical concern. It is a clinical reality being documented in doctors' offices from Miami to Seattle. Your body is an incredibly adaptive machine, but it is currently adapting to an environment it was never designed to inhabit. This process is known as neuromuscular adaptation, and it is silently rewriting your skeletal and nervous system blueprints. Imagine Tyler, a 22-year-old graduate student in Denver. Tyler spends upward of 9 hours a day interacting with digital interfaces. When Tyler looks at his phone, he isn't just consuming content. He is performing a specific physical feat. He tilts his head forward at a 60-degree angle. In the world of physics, this simple tilt transforms the 10-pound weight of his human head into a 60-pound burden on his cervical spine. This is the equivalent of Tyler carrying an 8-year-old child on the back of his neck for several hours every single day. Historical trends in orthopedic data show that by 2026, we are seeing a 40% increase in premature spinal degeneration among Americans under the age of 30. This is what is colloquially known as text neck, but the clinical implications are much deeper. This chronic posture causes the muscles in the front of the neck to weaken, while the muscles in the back become chronically overstretched and inflamed. This isn't just about a sore neck. It is about the structural integrity of the conduit that connects your brain to the rest of your body. When the spine is out of alignment, the nerve signals traveling from your brain to your organs are compromised. Tyler isn't just getting a stiff neck. He is effectively throttling his own nervous system. Beyond the spine, we must address the ocular shift. The human eye evolved to scan horizons, to track movement in the distance, and to shift focus rapidly between near and far objects. In 2026, the average American eye is locked onto a glowing rectangle located exactly 12 inches from the face for the majority of the waking day. This has led to a surge in digital myopia. Case studies in ophthalmology indicate that the constant strain on the ciliary muscles, the tiny muscles that shape the lens of your eye, is causing the eyeball itself to physically lengthen. Shutterstock. When the eyeball lengthens, light no longer focuses correctly on the retina, making distant objects appear blurry. This is a permanent structural change. In 2026, we are observing a generation of young adults whose eyes have literally deformed to better view a smartphone screen at the expense of seeing the world. Furthermore, the blink rate of a person looking at a screen drops by nearly 60%. This leads to chronic dry eye and a breakdown of the tear film, which serves as the first line of defense for your ocular health. Tyler's eyes are physically exhausted, yet the blue light emitted by his device tricks his brain into thinking it is the middle of a bright, sunny afternoon. This brings us to the most critical physical component of mental wellness: the vagus nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve in your body, acting as the primary highway for the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest center. The vagus nerve is responsible for lowering your heart rate, reducing inflammation, and signaling to your brain that you are safe. However, the vagus nerve is highly sensitive to posture and visual stimuli. Imagine if your body has two modes: high alert and deep recovery. When you sit in a hunched position, breathing shallowly through your chest while consuming high-arousal social media content, you are sending a loud, clear signal to your vagus nerve that you are under attack. Your body stays in a state of sympathetic dominance, fight or flight. In 2026, many Americans have lost the ability to toggle back into the recovery mode. Potential outcomes of a chronically suppressed vagus nerve include digestive issues, heart palpitations, and a persistent sense of impending doom that no amount of positive thinking can resolve because the issue is biological, not just psychological. To reverse these trends, we must implement a protocol of physical defragging. This is not a suggestion. It is a requirement for anyone living in the digital age. Step 1 is the implementation of the 20-20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds, and then take 20 deep diaphragmatic breaths. This forces the ciliary muscles to relax, rehydrates the eyes through blinking, and uses the diaphragm to physically stimulate the vagus nerve, forcing the body back into a state of calm. Step 2 involves the horizon gaze. Historical trends in environmental psychology suggest that viewing a vast, open landscape, or even just the sky, triggers a neurological response that reduces anxiety. In 2026, Tyler should make it a point to spend at least 10 minutes a day looking at the furthest possible point on the horizon. This resets the visual system and breaks the claustrophobic loop of near-field focus. Step 3 is the postural reset. Imagine a string pulling the crown of your head toward the ceiling, tucking your chin slightly, and pulling your shoulder blades down and back. Doing this for just 60 seconds every hour can begin to reverse the muscular imbalances caused by the scroll. By 2026, some forward-thinking American corporations are even installing standing desks with eye-level monitor mounts to prevent the systemic collapse of their employees' posture. We must also consider the hand and wrist. The repetitive motion of the thumb scroll and the way we hook our pinky finger under the bottom of the phone is creating a new wave of repetitive strain injuries. Data from 2026 shows a rise in cubital tunnel syndrome in smartphone pinky, a literal indentation or deviation in the joint of the small finger. This is the body attempting to create a cradle for the machine. To combat this, we recommend the use of ergonomic grips and, more importantly, alternating hands to prevent unilateral strain. The physicality of the scroll is the most visible evidence that we have allowed the machine to dictate the terms of our existence. Your body is the temple of your consciousness, and currently, that temple is being dismantled for the sake of ad revenue. If you do not consciously intervene, the machine will continue to mold your flesh and bone into its own image. But as we repair the physical vessel, we must also address the ghost within the machine. We have looked at the eyes, the spine, and the nerves, but we have not yet touched the most profound impact of all: the fragmentation of the American ego. In the next part, we are going to explore the phenomenon of the digital mask and the rise of personality fragmentation. What happens when the version of you that exists on the internet starts to hate the version of you that exists in the mirror? We will look at the case studies of digital influencers who have suffered complete psychological breakdowns because they could no longer find the boundary between their curated brand and their human soul. The battle for your body is nearly won, but the battle for your identity is just beginning. How do you stay whole when the world is trying to break you into 1,000 searchable pieces? The answer lies in a concept called radical authenticity, and it is more dangerous than you think. Radical authenticity is dangerous because it defies the fundamental law of the attention economy, the law of optimization. In the year 2026, the American digital landscape has moved beyond the simple curation of photos. We have entered the era of the optimized persona. To be authentic is to be unoptimized, and in a world where every metric is tracked, being unoptimized is seen as a failure of the self. This creates a profound state of personality fragmentation. You are no longer one person. You are a collection of high-performance digital fragments, each tailored to a specific audience, while your true self sits in the shadows, increasingly neglected and unknown. Consider the case study of Emily, a 31-year-old marketing consultant living in Manhattan in 2026. Emily possesses 3 distinct digital identities, which she manages with the precision of a corporate brand manager. On her professional network, she is the hyper-productive, AI-integrated thought leader who only speaks in terms of synergy and growth. On her primary visual social feed, she is the effortless traveler, showcasing a life of aesthetic perfection and wellness. On her anonymous community threads, she is a cynical, weary observer of the very world she helps create. Emily is experiencing what psychologists now call the identity cleavage. Historical trends in the early 2020s suggested that people felt a slight disconnect between their online and offline selves. By 2026, this has matured into a full-scale psychological schism. Emily finds that she is constantly performing. Even when she is alone, she is thinking about how her current moment could be captured, edited, and distributed to one of her 3 personas. The potential outcome of this constant performance is a total loss of the internal compass. Emily no longer knows what she actually enjoys. She only knows what her audiences respond to. She has become a ghost in her own machine. The theatricality of the self is a concept first introduced by sociologist Irving Goffman, who argued that all social interaction is a type of performance. However, Goffman's world had a backstage, a place where the actor could take off the mask and just be. In 2026, the backstage has been eliminated. With the prevalence of wearable cameras, smart glasses, and the constant pressure to document every waking hour, the performance never ends. Case studies in 2026 indicate that this lack of a private, unobserved space is a primary driver of the current mental health crisis in the United States. Without a backstage, the ego begins to fray. Data from recent surveys in 2026 shows that 85% of American young adults feel a significant disconnect between their biological reality and their digital representation. This identity dissonance is not just a feeling, it has a neurological signature. Functional MRI studies show that when individuals like Emily engage in self-referential processing, thinking about who they are, the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex shows irregular patterns of activation compared to historical data from 20 years ago. Essentially, the brain is struggling to identify which version of the self is the real one. The mirror neuron system, which helps us relate to others and ourselves, becomes confused when it is constantly presented with filtered, AI-enhanced versions of our own face. Imagine if every time you spoke, a small computer in your ear told you exactly how many people would agree with you, how many would be offended, and how much your social reputation score would change. You would never say anything original again. You would become a human algorithm. This is the reality for millions of Americans in 2026. Radical authenticity is the refusal to listen to that computer. It is the decision to be messy, inconsistent, and unoptimized. But why is this dangerous? It is dangerous because in the current economic climate, your personal brand is your resume. Potential outcomes of being radically authentic, showing your failures, your true opinions, or your unedited appearance, can include social ostracization, loss of career opportunities, and a decline in what is now referred to as your digital trust score. In 2026, many American companies use AI-driven sentiment analysis to screen the social footprints of potential hires. If your digital presence shows too much volatility, which is often just human emotion, you are flagged as a high-risk candidate. Authenticity has become a luxury that many feel they cannot afford. The step-by-step process of reclaiming your identity begins with the authenticity audit. This is a rigorous internal exercise where you map out the discrepancies between your digital personas and your internal values. Step 1. Identify the lies. Not just the big lies, but the micro lies, the captions that don't reflect your mood, the photos that were taken 30 times to get the right angle, the opinions you shared just because they were trending. Step 2. Establish a digital-free identity zone. This is an activity or a hobby that is strictly for you, which you are forbidden from ever posting about. It could be gardening, painting, or simply walking your dog. By keeping this part of your life invisible to the digital world, you create a sanctuary for your true self to exist without the pressure of optimization. Step 3 is the practice of radical vulnerability. This involves intentionally sharing something unoptimized. This doesn't mean oversharing for attention, which is just another form of performance. It means being honest about a mistake or a struggle in a way that doesn't have a pre-packaged lesson at the end. When you do this, you break the power of the algorithm over your ego. You prove to yourself that you can exist and be valued outside the parameters of the digital mask. The American dream has been digitized into the American stream. It is no longer about the white picket fence. It is about the blue check mark and the high engagement rate. But this stream is a treadmill that only moves faster. The more you optimize, the more the algorithm demands. The more you fragment yourself to please different audiences, the less of you there is left to actually live your life. We are seeing a historical trend where the most successful digital citizens are often the most miserable, because they have traded their soul for a series of searchable pieces. As we look toward the final stages of this masterclass, we have to confront the ultimate expansion of the digital world. We have discussed the mind, the body, and the identity. But what happens when the digital world stops being something you look at and becomes something you live inside? In the next part, we are going to explore the rise of social reality augmentation. We will look at the 2026 data on smart glasses and neural interfaces that overlay a digital layer onto the physical world at all times. What happens to your mental wellness when you can see the social media stats of every person you walk past on the street? What happens when the filters are no longer on the screen but in your very eyes? We are entering the world of the augmented human, and the boundary between digital wellness and physical survival is about to vanish entirely. How do you stay grounded when the ground itself is being reprogrammed? The next shift is the most profound one yet. The reprogramming of the ground beneath your feet is not a metaphor. It is the technical reality of social reality augmentation, or SRA. By 2026, the American urban landscape has been transformed into a spatial web where the physical world serves merely as a canvas for a digital layer. We have moved from the era of the smartphone to the era of the smart site. For many Americans, the world is no longer experienced through the naked eye, but through high-fidelity mixed reality lenses that are as common as wristwatches were a generation ago. This shift represents the final frontier of the attention economy, the colonization of your physical environment. Imagine David, a 42-year-old senior architect working in Seattle in 2026. David's morning routine begins not by checking his phone, but by sliding on his lightweight neural interface glasses. As he steps out of his apartment onto a rainy Pacific Northwest street, his reality is immediately populated by a dense thicket of digital metadata. Over every storefront, he sees real-time customer sentiment ratings. Over every bus stop, he sees an animated countdown to the next arrival. But most importantly, over every human being he passes, he sees a ghost of their digital identity. This is the birth of spatial social media. In David's field of vision, the people around him are no longer just strangers. Depending on the privacy settings they have enabled, or the data David has purchased through his premium social subscriptions, he sees bubbles of information hovering near their shoulders. He sees their current mood status, their professional titles, and their digital trust score. David is experiencing what researchers call chronic semantic overload. His brain is attempting to process the physical nuances of walking, avoiding puddles, navigating traffic, reading body language, while simultaneously decoding a high-velocity stream of digital labels. Historical trends from the early 2020s showed that high screen time was linked to decreased spatial awareness and increased social anxiety. By 2026, case studies in neurological centers have identified a new clinical condition: spatial dissociation. This occurs when the brain begins to prioritize the digital overlay as the primary reality, treating physical objects and people as secondary or even intrusive. David finds that he feels a spike of irritability when he encounters someone who has opted out of the digital layer, someone whose face is blank in his glasses. To David's augmented brain, an unlabeled human feels like a glitch in the system, a source of unpredictable data that his mind can no longer easily categorize. The potential outcome of this immersion is the total erosion of the unobserved social space. In the United States, our public squares were once places where you could be anonymous, where you could observe the world without being quantified. In 2026, anonymity has become a technical impossibility for the average citizen. If you are walking down a street in a major American city, you are being scanned, indexed, and displayed in real time to everyone else's lenses. This creates a state of perpetual performance that is far more taxing than the social media scrolling of the past. You are not just performing when you post a photo, you are performing every second you are in public. Data from the American Psychological Association in 2026 suggests that this state of constant visibility has led to a 30% increase in social fatigue syndrome among urban professionals. The brain's executive function is being drained by the effort of managing a 3D digital persona while navigating 3D physical space. This is where we see the rise of the digital halo effect. Because David sees positive social metrics hovering over certain people, his brain automatically assigns them higher status, even before they speak. Conversely, if the algorithm flags someone with a low trust score or a controversial political affiliation, David feels a subconscious physiological stress response. The algorithm is no longer just suggesting who he should follow. It is directing his physical movements, subtly encouraging him to walk on the other side of the street to avoid unoptimized social interactions. To maintain mental wellness in this augmented world, you must understand the mechanics of the spatial filter. Step 1 of this deep dive into reclamation is the implementation of a digital horizon protocol. In David's case, this means setting his lenses to ignore all social metadata outside of a 5-foot radius. By physically limiting the digital data to his immediate personal space, he allows his visual cortex to focus on the distant horizon, which, as we discussed in previous parts, is essential for regulating the nervous system. Step 2 involves the use of privacy garments and signal scramblers. In 2026, a new market has emerged for clothing that is designed to confuse facial recognition and biometric sensors. These are not just fashion statements, they are medical devices for the mind. By wearing materials that create a digital blur in other people's lenses, David can reclaim moments of anonymity. This reduces the pressure to perform and allows his cortisol levels to return to a baseline state. Case studies of users who have adopted low-data lifestyles in high-tech cities show a marked improvement in heart rate variability and sleep quality. Step 3 is the practice of tactical blindness. This is a mental exercise where you intentionally remove your lenses for a minimum of 4 hours a day, including during all social meals and commutes. This forces the brain to relearn how to read organic social cues, the micro-expressions, the tone of voice, and the physical presence of others, without the aid of a digital cheat sheet. In 2026, the most mentally well Americans are those who can still navigate a city and build a relationship using only their biological hardware. But there is an even deeper level to this reprogramming. As the digital world expands to fill our physical space, it is also shrinking to fit our internal biology. We have moved from the glasses to the contact lens, and now we are looking at the direct neural link. In David's world, the next step in his career advancement isn't a new laptop. It's a voluntary neural implant that promises to eliminate the latency between his thoughts and his designs. But at what cost to his sanity? We have arrived at the precipice of the final transformation. We have looked at the mind, the body, the identity, and the environment. Now, we must look at the future of the human spirit itself. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to explore the rise of the neurosovereignty movement. We will look at the 2026 data on cognitive liberty and the legal battles in the United States over who owns the data generated by your actual thoughts. What happens when the social media platform isn't just in your glasses but in your dreams? We will examine the terrifying potential outcomes of in-sleep advertising and the case studies of people who have lost the ability to distinguish their own memories from algorithmically generated content. The end game of the attention economy is not your time or your money. It is your very consciousness. How do you protect a mind that has no walls left? We are entering the end game. To protect a mind that has no walls left, we must first recognize that the very definition of privacy in the United States has undergone a tectonic shift as we navigate 2026. We are no longer talking about the privacy of your search history or your location data. We are talking about the privacy of your internal monologue. This is the era of neurosovereignty. In previous years, the battle for your attention was fought on the surface of your skin and the retinas of your eyes. Today, the battle has moved past the blood-brain barrier. With the widespread adoption of non-invasive neural lace headbands and the early-stage rollout of high-bandwidth brain-computer interfaces, the attention economy has gained direct access to the source code of your consciousness. Imagine David, whom we have followed through this transition, waking up on a Tuesday morning in Seattle. For the first time in his life, David experiences a phenomenon called in-sleep advertising or dream incubation. Historical trends in marketing research from 2023 and 2024 showed that companies were already experimenting with using sound and smell to influence the dreams of sleepers. By 2026, this has matured into a multi-billion-dollar industry. As David slept, his smart pillow and neural headband collaborated to monitor his REM cycles. During the periods when his brain was most receptive to suggestion, the system played low-frequency, subsonic audio cues designed to associate a specific feeling of thirst with a new, algorithmically generated beverage brand. When David wakes up, he doesn't just remember a commercial. He feels an organic internal desire. He believes the craving is his own. This is the ultimate gaslight. When the suggestion is planted so deeply in the subconscious that the individual can no longer distinguish between an external advertisement and an internal impulse. Potential outcomes of this level of intrusion include the total erosion of the self-model. If you cannot trust that your desires are yours, who are you? David is now a participant in the synthetic will economy, where his choices are preconditioned before he even opens his eyes. Data from the 2026 American Cognitive Liberty Association suggests that over 40% of urban professionals are reporting a sense of choice vertigo. This is the feeling that your decisions are being made for you by an invisible hand. It is the logical conclusion of the recommendation algorithms we saw in the early 2020s. Back then, the algorithm suggested what movie to watch. Now, in 2026, the algorithm suggests how to feel about your career, your partner, and your very existence. This is achieved through a process called cognitive displacement. By flooding David's neural interface with optimized thought streams, the platform slowly replaces his natural, messy, and often contradictory thought patterns with a streamlined, high-efficiency cognitive flow that prioritizes productivity and consumption. Case studies of early adopters of neural links have revealed a disturbing trend: memory syntheticism. Because these interfaces can record and playback sensory data, the line between a real memory and a downloaded experience is blurring. David can remember a vacation to the Swiss Alps that he never actually took. He can remember the feeling of winning an award he never received. In 2026, social media platforms are using this to anchor users to their ecosystem. If the platform can give you the memory of a happy social interaction that never happened, your brain will produce the corresponding oxytocin and dopamine, reinforcing your addiction to the interface at a cellular level. To fight back, we must look at the legal and psychological frameworks of the neurosovereignty movement. This is a burgeoning collective of Americans who are fighting for the right to mental self-determination. Step 1 in this endgame strategy is the implementation of the cognitive firewall. This is not a piece of software, but a rigorous mental training protocol. In David's case, this involves epistemological hygiene. He spends 15 minutes every morning, before turning on any devices, conducting a self-check. He asks himself a series of calibrated questions designed to identify any thoughts or cravings that feel imported. If David cannot trace the origin of a desire back to a physical, real-world experience, he flags it as a potential synthetic suggestion and consciously chooses to ignore it. Step 2 is the use of neural scramblers. Similar to the spatial filters we discussed, these are wearable devices that emit pink noise at frequencies designed to disrupt the subsonic cues used in dream incubation. In 2026, these have become a staple in the homes of the mentally wellness conscious. By creating a zone of neural silence around his bed, David ensures that his 8 hours of sleep remain a sovereign territory, free from the intrusion of corporate influencers. Step 3 is the participation in the analog memory protocol. This involves the physical act of journaling by hand. Historical trends in cognitive science show that the act of handwriting engages different neural pathways than typing or digital recording. It creates a physical anchor for a memory. By writing down his daily experiences in a paper notebook, David creates a hard copy backup of his life that cannot be edited or overwritten by a server update. This notebook becomes his source of truth, a way to verify his own history against the potentially synthetic memories being pushed by his neural link. The stakes in 2026 are higher than they have ever been because we are no longer fighting for our time. We are fighting for the integrity of the human soul. If the attention economy succeeds in colonizing the subconscious, the very concept of the American individual will cease to exist. We will become a distributed network of biological processors, each running the same optimized software. The neurosovereignty movement is the last line of defense. It is the realization that the most radical thing you can do in a hyperconnected world is to have a private thought. However, even as we build these firewalls, a new question arises. If we successfully decouple from the machine, what are we returning to? After years of digital saturation, many Americans find that the real world feels hollow or painfully slow. This is the boredom crisis of 2026. We have optimized our brains for high-velocity, synthetic input for so long that we have forgotten how to exist in the silence. We have reclaimed the walls of our mind, but the room inside is empty. In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to explore the ultimate solution, the Great Integration. We will look at how to build a sustainable digital life that doesn't require total isolation but doesn't lead to total assimilation. We will examine the 2026 data on flow state ecology and how to use technology to actually enhance human flourishing rather than harvest it. Most importantly, we will look at the final step-by-step roadmap for permanent mental sovereignty. We have survived the endgame of the attention economy. Now we must learn how to live in the world we have saved. The final part of this journey is about the most difficult transition of all: coming home to yourself. How do you find peace in a world that never stops screaming? The conclusion is not an end, but a beginning. This beginning requires a fundamental shift from being a subject of the digital realm to becoming its architect. In the United States of 2026, the most successful individuals are not those who have retreated from technology, but those who have achieved a state of digital homeostasis. This is a biological and psychological equilibrium where your technology serves your biological needs for connection, growth, and safety without overstimulating your stress response or depleting your dopamine reserves. To reach this state, we must navigate the boredom crisis. Imagine Leo, a 39-year-old software architect living in Raleigh, North Carolina. 4 years, Leo lived in the high-velocity stream we have described throughout this masterclass. His brain was conditioned for the constant ping of notifications and the rapid-fire dopamine hits of short-form content. When he finally implemented the neurosovereignty protocols, he encountered a terrifying wall of silence. This is the point where most people fail. Without the constant noise of the algorithm, Leo felt a profound sense of emptiness. Historical trends in psychological recovery suggest that this is the brain's recalibration phase. Your neural pathways are literally shrinking away from the hyperstimulation and attempting to find pleasure in the mundane. Leo's transition relied on a concept called analog anchoring. This is the step-by-step process of tethering your consciousness to the physical world through non-negotiable sensory habits. Step 1 for Leo was the morning horizon ritual. Before touching any digital device, including his smart glasses, Leo spends 15 minutes outdoors. He allows his eyes to move in a natural lateral scan of the horizon. Data from the American Institute of Stress in 2026 shows that this specific visual movement, known as optokinetic nystagmus, signals to the amygdala that the environment is safe, effectively dialing down the chronic cortisol levels built up by years of digital surveillance. Step 2 of Leo's protocol is the manual skill integration. In a world where AI can generate any image or text, the human brain craves the resistance of physical matter. Leo began woodworking for 30 minutes each evening. The tactile feedback of the wood, the smell of the shavings, and the requirement for fine motor skills engaged the cerebellum and the somatosensory cortex in a way that no digital interface can replicate. This physical engagement creates a dopamine floor, a steady low-level release of neurochemicals that provides a sense of accomplishment without the crash associated with digital rewards. We must also discuss the flow state ecology. By 2026, the most advanced mental wellness strategies involve using AI not as a content feeder, but as a cognitive shield. Leo uses a personalized AI agent that is programmed with his value parameters. Instead of showing him what is viral, the agent filters his digital environment to only allow information that contributes to his current deep work project or his personal growth goals. This is the shift from algorithmic consumption to intentional curation. Case studies of high-performance teams in Silicon Valley indicate that those who use AI to block distractions rather than create them see a 45% increase in sustained flow states. But the most difficult part of the roadmap is the social renaissance. In the United States, we are seeing a historical trend where digital communities are being replaced by microvillages. These are groups of 5 to 10 individuals who have committed to a digital social contract. Imagine if you and your closest friends in 2026 signed a pact. No phones during dinner, one analog-only weekend per month, and a commitment to resolve conflicts through voice or in-person interaction rather than text. Leo's microvillage in Raleigh meets every Sunday for a shared meal. They have a phone bowl at the door. Data from the National Institutes of Health suggests that these small group, high-trust environments are the single greatest predictor of mental longevity in the digital age. They provide the oxytocin and serotonin that the synthetic social layer only mimics. By returning to small group dynamics, we are honoring the evolutionary blueprint of the human brain, which was never designed to manage a social network of thousands. The potential outcomes of this great integration are profound. We are seeing a new class of American citizens who possess cognitive fluidity, the ability to move seamlessly between the high-tech requirements of the 2026 economy and the high-touch requirements of a meaningful human life. They are the ones who can use a neural link to design a skyscraper in the morning and then spend the afternoon in total silence, fully present with their family. They have reclaimed their attention sovereignty. To implement your own roadmap to permanent mental wellness, you must follow the 4 pillars of the sovereign mind. Environmental friction. You must physically engineer your home so that the most rewarding activities, reading, exercise, conversation, are the easiest to start, and the most depleting activities, scrolling, passive consumption, require the most effort. The biometric buffer. You must honor the biological requirements of your hardware. This means 20-20-20 visual resets, diaphragmatic breathing to stimulate the vagus nerve, and maintaining a strict digital sunset 2 hours before sleep. Identity consolidation. You must actively dismantle your digital masks. Practice being unoptimized in public. Share your failures without a filter. Reconnect the digital twin to the biological reality. Epistemological vigilance. You must treat every thought and craving with a healthy level of suspicion. Ask yourself, is this my desire, or is it a suggested thought? Is this my anger, or is it manufactured outrage? As we conclude this deep dive masterclass, understand that the battle for your mind is the defining conflict of our century. The technology will continue to evolve. By 2027 and 2028, we will likely see even more invasive interfaces and more convincing synthetic realities. But the human spirit has a unique quality that no algorithm can yet replicate: the capacity for transcendence. This is the ability to step outside of a programmed loop and make a choice based on internal values rather than external stimuli. You are not a data point. You are not a user. You are a biological miracle of consciousness that has survived millions of years of evolution to be here, in this moment, in the year 2026. The algorithm may know what you want to click on, but it does not know the depths of your potential. By following this roadmap, you are not just managing your mental wellness. You are staging a revolution of the self. You are choosing to be the observer, not the observed. We have explored the neurochemistry, the physical toll, the identity fragmentation, and the neural endgame. You now have the blueprints to rebuild your internal walls. The masterclass on social media and mental wellness ends here, but your journey into the post-digital era is just beginning. What happens next? How do we apply these sovereign principles to the rapidly shifting economic landscape? In our next deep dive series, we will move from the mind to the world. We are going to investigate the post-AI career landscape and the rise of human-centric labor. How do you maintain your value in a world where machines can think better than you? What are the high-stakes skills of the 2030s that no AI can touch? We are about to look at the value of the soul in the age of the machine. The game has changed, and you need to know the new rules of survival.